This is Voices for Climate, the podcast where activists, scientists, innovators, and everyday people speak out for our planet. If you're looking for honest conversations, bold ideas, and real climate solutions, you're in the right place. My name is Arnav, and today we're joined by Cheryl Weiden, a member of the steering committee at 350 Silicon Valley. She works throughout the Bay Area to advocate for strong climate action at the city and county level, forming partnerships with other climate advocacy groups. Her work includes efforts to decrease air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions by getting off of fossil fuels and addressing issues in transportation and buildings. Cheryl, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you. And you did a good introduction about our organization.
Yeah, so to start off, can you kind of share what first inspired you to get involved in community-based climate work? I mean, you've had a long career that spans sales, fitness, and eventually activism. So what drew you to, environmental advocacy in the first place?
Well, let me just say it's because I'm a mother. A number of years ago, I think my kids are grown and I'm a grandmother now. But when they were, I think, in middle school, my husband and I we were listening to books on tape at the time, listened to a book on tape, and I believe the name of it was The Weathermen. And it wasn't about a terrorist group. It was about weather, it was about climate. And we were shocked and horrified because we didn't know anything about the future. We didn't know anything about climate change. And we were horrified about the future that our children would face if things continued as they were. And we started getting involved with organizations and commissions and trying to make a difference.
Yeah, it's a really inspiring journey. And so, now you're at 350 Silicon Valley. And for those viewers who may not know what it is, could you elaborate on what 350 Silicon Valley is, kind of what work do they do, and what is your role within the organization?
Yes, 350 Silicon Valley is a local group of 350 Bay Area. And we are not associated with 350.org, which is a national organization which does not have chapters. The local 350, but we have the same philosophy. Our mission is to advance a just and rapid transition off of fossil fuels to 100% renewable energy. Let me restate that. To transition off of dirty, polluting, unhealthy burning of fossil fuels to healthy and clean energy. So we're a part of 350 Bay Area. We're a local group. There are seven of them, which covers the entire Bay Area. And we have slightly different focuses because of our different geographies, but our philosophy is basically that, to get off of fossil fuels and decrease the emissions at the local level.
I see. And can you elaborate kind of on what work the organization does in order to achieve those goals?
Yes, we advocate at the local level, and I'll talk about that in a moment, to address things that localities can accomplish. And the biggest emissions at the local level are buildings and transportation. Now, transportation is a little tricky at the local level because it involves land use, it involves multiple areas, and is takes a lot of coordination. However, buildings can be addressed at the city and county level. So we do a lot of work on buildings at the city and county level. We also have projects on divestment. Cities and counties can divest from fossil fuels. We've also had a project to support the students at Stanford because the Door School of Sustainability at Stanford does two things that we object to, and the students object to, fossil-free Stanford objects to. One is it takes investments from fossil fuel companies to do research, and that research can provide solutions which are greenwashing for the fuel companies. And they also have money that they invest in fossil fuel companies. So we've supported these students of fossil-free Stanford to get the word out about their work also. So that's some of the um, projects that we are involved in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned earlier you kind of work at the local level, rather than like state or federal legislation. And so kind of in your opinion, why is that local focus specifically so powerful?
Because your voice is more effective at the local level. We can talk about four levels of advocacy. One is me, individually, what I can do. I can recycle, I can pick up, my husband and I walk and we have a plastic bag with us and we pick up garbage along the way. That's looks a little funny, but we do it. And actually, people thank us along the way. But it makes us feel good. Does it make a big difference? Probably not, but it makes us feel good. That's individual level. Um, we can also encourage our family to do it. Um, we've encouraged, or my son eats, I wouldn't say vegan, but a lot less animal products, and so does his family now. Um, so you can influence your immediate family. Then you can, on the third level, you can work with or to influence your community. That means your city, your school, your county. And that can be effective because you can probably get to know or set up a meeting with your city council member, with your board of supervisor, with your school board members. You can address them at meetings, and your voice can be very effective. The fourth level of advocacy is policy at the state or federal level, and you can certainly join in with other groups to do that, and that's great, but your voice will be much smaller. So we work at the local level to be effective at the city and county level, feeling that it empowers individuals to make changes, to be effective.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And so can you, dive deeper into are there any success stories about, successful city or county level initiatives that your team has helped move forward?
Well, last night was a Tuesday night in the city of Los Altos, and the city council passed what we call a REACH code, which was a building ordinance which would help reduce future gas-fired appliances. That was a maybe small, but win. It was a win. And we've had other teams in different Menlo Park, Palo Alto. We work with other groups in, for instance, Mountain View, San Jose, to do similar things. So
Yeah, that's really nice.
that was one win just last night.
Yeah, that's really nice and great timing that it was just last
Great
night.
timing.
Yeah. So I want to, touch on something you mentioned earlier. So you talked about how transportation and buildings are, two of the biggest like sources of emissions, at least at kind of the local level. And you mentioned kind of some of the challenges with transportations, but can you elaborate more on buildings and what can be done in terms of reducing emissions within buildings and infrastructure?
Yes, the thing about gas, let me first address gas in buildings. I've thought about this a lot. Years ago, we didn't know about gas in buildings. And so it was a normal thing to heat your home, heat your water heater, and cook with gas. But we didn't know. We didn't know that it emitted greenhouse gases. It's actually methane, which is worse than carbon dioxide. And we also didn't know the health effects. We didn't know that those appliances not only emit methane, but they emit uh, nitrous oxide, volatile organic compounds, toxins, particulate matter. All of these things are health problems. So we are burning the gas in these gas appliances that pollute outdoor air and indoor air. It's very bad for health. And I just want to mention the outdoor air is very affected by water heaters and space heating. But when we take a look at the indoor air, that's your gas cooking. And people love their gas cooktops. And that's really bad for children. And that affects parents who have children, families. And there's there's a lot of evidence that that causes respiratory illnesses like asthma in children. And I'm sure that we didn't know those things before. So moving those appliances to electric will do a lot, not only to reduce the emissions from the city, but also to increase or improve the air for health. And I'll say the way you do that is there are appliances to do that. One is for your space heating, um, is heat pump heater, and for your water heating is a heat pump water heater, and for your induction, for your cooking, rather than going to gas, going to induction. I want to say one thing about that too, because moving people off of gas is difficult. They're kicking and screaming about, I want my gas stove. I have an induction cooktop and I love it. I'm like, this is much better. And there are two additional things I want to mention about that. Cleaning it is easy. It's like you wipe it clean. You don't have all those nicks and crannies to get into. And also, it's not as hot. So it doesn't burn. Like if you touch the gas cooktop or the grates, it will burn if a little kid puts his hand on it. These,
Mhm.
I won't say they are not hot, but they are less likely to burn than gas cooked up. I love mine. So
Yeah.
moving from those to electric is how you do it. And I just want to mention one more thing about that too. People also will complain it's expensive. And there are so many financial incentives right there, right now, that on the mostly it's not. Some of them are going away at the end of the year with federal tax credits. But I'll just mention one thing. When we put in our gas cooktop, it was about a $4,000 investment with the electricity upgrades, and we ended up getting paid 2,000 to do it.
Wow.
There's some with all the incentives that we ended up putting $2,000 in our pocket for that removing that gas appliance.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is obviously, a really big issue, but I feel like a lot of people just aren't aware of it. As you said
Oh,
yourself, right? People are attached to kind of their, gas appliances. And so, when you think about, maybe parents of children who are working 9 to 5 jobs, have to take care of their children, and may not have the time to, inform themselves about the issue or put in the time to get these things replaced. Are there any things your organization is doing to, help communities understand about the risks of, gas appliances and helping people like kind of act on that?
oh, that's really hard. And I want to go back to when I was a mom and I didn't know anything about climate change. And I can relate because I was working, my husband was working, we had two little kids. Um, my daughter was involved in soccer, which was a big deal. And they had homework and they were applying to colleges. I understand it's really busy and it's hard to get their attention. It's very hard to get their attention. In fact, I just read yesterday, I want to mention that federal tax credits are going away at the end of this year for energy upgrades for your home. I read 60% of American families do not know this. This is a big deal. They do not know that there's money out there that they could get, but it's going away at the end of December. And it's really hard to get their attention. We are doing a lot of outreach. We are doing a lot of outreach. We got a grant to do outreach right now in San Mateo County. And I'm going to say we've been struggling with the messaging. We've been struggling with the messaging because uh, I'm in a bubble that you say electrification or you say decarbonization, and everybody in my bubble knows what that is. Everybody in my bubble knows that's healthy. It's clean. It reduces emissions. If you say that outside my bubble, they don't know what I'm talking about. So we've moved our messaging from decarbonization, electrification we moved it to save money, and we're moving it further to health, health for your
Mhm.
families.
Mhm.
And we are incorporating a new approach to specifically engage families. And we've partnered with this wonderful man named Andrew Brighthawk, and he's an artist. And his story is that he is very passionate about climate, and he became depressed about it and decided what could he do with his skill. So he decided to make games, and he calls these games climate carnival games. They are beautiful, engaging, awesome, original. I cannot say enough about these games. He calls them the Trojan horse of climate education. And we've used these games in events to draw families, and the kids love them. You haven't seen anything like these games before, most of them. Some of them are really big, they're like 6 feet tall, and some of them are little. And we also engage teens sometime, often we engage teens who are the best to play with the children with these games, and show them how to use the games. Um, there are things like throwing bean bags at stuff, or it all has a um, climate base. Everything's climate oriented. And
Mhm.
while the kids are playing the games, we talk to the parents. We talk to the parents about um, what their appliances are doing in their homes, what toxins the appliances are putting in their homes. We have people at the events like Physicians for Social Responsibility. We have posters showing the toxins that are in the house with these appliances. And we also share with them uh, how to do the upgrades, and also the financial incentives to get them to move towards electrification or electric appliances.
I see. Yeah, I mean that sounds really unique. The whole carnival and games is dedicated to climate. I feel like that's a really great way to get people kind of engaged. But I guess kind of on that topic about outreach and communication, how do you kind of deal with explaining these topics about, electrification or switching from gas appliances to, varying communities? Some people obviously, agree climate change is a real threat, but there are people, who are on the other end of that spectrum and do not necessarily agree that climate change is a real threat. So how do you kind of reconcile between that and maybe tailor your messaging depending on who your audience is?
Hmm. I deal with that every day. That is a tough question. And it's at this stage in my life, I'm still learning and being challenged by that. And I think um, in the communication strategy, when you talk to people, you first feel them out. You ask them questions. How are they feeling? What do they think about this? And if it's a strong denier, and there are people there, it's not worth dealing with. It's not worth trying to convince them. But if they're a little softer on the issue, we talk about a communication sandwich, a sandwich where you explore together what things you might value. What are your values? What similarities do we have in values? And for me, it would be family. For a young person, it may be future. And you explore those together. And then we move on to what the threats are. What are the threats that are coming uh, to attack our values? And and then what's the vision of where we can go and how do we get there? And so we take them all along slowly. Like I said, if they're really adamant, and there are those who are really adamant, just don't deal with it. Just walk away nicely, but always be nice.
Right. Yeah, I like the way you put it, kind of a communication sandwich, to find, I guess, common ground and then kind of lead people to, understand kind of the real threats about this issue. Because I think, I like the way you put it because it kind of shows how we're all in this together and there's all a role that each of us can play. And so, I'm kind of on the topic of, communication. Um, what, I guess, strategies or ideas have you found most effective in, motivating people to take action locally? Like what things have been effective at, say, city council meetings to get people, to get kind of these legislators to enact change?
Yes, that is also a challenging question. So there are levels that you can get people to show up. That's pretty difficult, but you can get people to go on Zoom. You can get people to write letters. And we also have some tools where we can do something called a click through, which we can provide the letter and they just have to click. And the messaging that we use, we try to use messaging to get their attention. Once again, what is valuable to the person? What will get their attention? What will make them at least click? Or if it's really important to them, show up. Show up. The other
Mhm.
thing is if, and I'm going to digress to teens for a second, and that is teens can get other teens. And that's really helpful when teens show up and bring their friends.
Yeah, I want to, dive a little deeper into that. Why do you think that youth voices especially are so powerful at the city level?
I think um, the city council people see people like me all the time. Um, and when a youth comes, they get attention. They're different. Um, they're refreshing and they're charming and they are believable because it's their future, it's their future.
Mhm.
And it's impressive too when they know what they're talking about and they tell their story. Uh,
Mhm.
I have seen the youth at the city council. I have seen the things that they've asked for and they've gotten. I have seen the I have seen a mayor defend a teen against a person who was opposing the issue. And in that case, the the proposal passed. Proposal that she
Wow.
was um, advocating for passed, but she was great. She was very, very effective. I wanted
Yeah.
to mention that again. It was a
Mhm.
young woman who was making a proposal for this thing called a REACH, called this building ordinance. And the opposer came up and attacked her personally. The opposer said that young woman does not know what she's talking about because when she gets out of high school and she goes and to work and makes her own money, her views will change and she'll be much more conscious of her money and she won't care about these things. And the mayor has two children and he blasted her. He blasted the opponent and said, I am totally incensed by what you said. She had every right to make that comment, and it's her future. And I have kids too. And he was incensed, and that whole story ended up in the paper.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really inspiring story. I think it goes to show, there is a lot that youth can do. I feel like at times, it feels like our voices are kind of powerless, but I think this is a really great example that youth do have a power and they can do things. And so, on that topic, I guess, what are some things that youth can do either at the, city council level, maybe at their schools, or, any other ideas? Like what can you do to get involved and make a difference?
There, when you could join a high school green team. The green teams often work at their school level. They could also address things at the school board. At the school board, um, one thing. I'm not clear on is how much education, climate education is in the schools. If it's not there, if you're not getting climate education, you could advocate for climate education at the school, at the school level. They can also join a youth group, um, like Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action, and learn and form teams in the city to learn about what's on in the city and then join together and advocate for certain issues. Or they can join our organization. We work with Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action also at our website, 350siliconvalley.org, the volunteer page, and we'll put you in touch with other org teams. Um, and you can join us when we advocate. So you could have several adults coming up and we'll bring a youth, which um, would probably be our star.
Yeah, and on the topic of education, for schools that may not offer kind of climate education, besides advocating to school boards for increased climate education, what advice would you give to someone who, maybe wants to get educated, but their school doesn't offer the resources?
That's a good question. There is some websites, one especially that I think is really good called Project Drawdown. Um, that's a really good site for education. And the other organization that I would touch base with is the Climate Reality Project. They do a lot of education. Um, and if anybody wants to touch base with more ideas or questions regarding that, just have them contact me.
Yeah, I think that's, really great advice. And then, my last question to you is, I think you kind of already touched on this before, but for people that may feel daunted by, say, going to their city council meeting and giving a public comment or things like that, what are some smaller, maybe baby steps that someone could take to begin with to help, kind of make a difference if they're interested in, getting involved in climate advocacy, but maybe don't want to take such big steps at the start?
Just sign up with an organization, sign up with us, sign up with Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action, and any organization will help train you on what the issue, what the you probably know what the science is, but we can help you with that, what the issues are, and then hold your hand going to do those steps. There is on our website, there's some trainings, local climate advocacy, and they feature a youth, Anjali Mishra, giving a 2-minute talk to the city council. And she looks fabulous. She looks very confident and she speaks very well. If you speak to her in person, she says she was scared. She was really scared. She was very nervous, but you could never tell. And she gave a very effective comment.
Yeah, that's, such amazing advice. And I think it's a very powerful note to end on. So, Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience and insights and advice. It was very helpful, and I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your asking me, Arnav. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so that's all we have today on Voices for Climate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the show and share it with someone who cares about building a more sustainable future. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you.